In this video, I'm going to tell you how I learned Vietnamese and how using a similar strategy, you can do the same thing. First things first, I want to get a glass of juice here at the juice stop. Maybe juice lady. Chào, chào chị. Lấy một ly nước ép. Let's see what they have. Nước ép cam. Đúng rồi, không đường. Come on nha. So, I got a glass of orange juice with no sugar. Cảm ơn. Bao nhiêu? 200. Okay, so 20,000 Vietnam dong. Delicious, fresh squeezed. So the number one thing that I've done to learn Vietnamese is I've always stayed curious. I've done my best to keep an open mind towards learning and to learn new words and phrases whenever I can. So if I see a new word written somewhere and you can kind of tell, or you can at least have a chance at reading words here because it uses a Latin alphabet, the Vietnamese language. So when I see different words and new words that I don't know, I try to learn what they mean. I'm usually very open to learning new things when it comes to the Vietnamese language. So I've always kept that mentality of just, staying open, having an open mind towards learning and being generally curious enough to want to try to learn. This doesn't have to be in like an oppressive or obsessive way either. It can be something as simple as maybe wanting to learn just a little bit every day, like one new word, or maybe one new word every week. It doesn't have to be something that you're just constantly obsessing over, like I have to learn as much as I possibly can today, or I have to do 5 hours today. Not only do I think that could possibly lead to like a burnout type feeling, but I also feel like it's not necessary in order to pick up, bit by bit here and there. And if you're living here, you've got, the time to do it. So you're not really rushed or stressed about, I've got to learn this amount within this amount of time. If you are trying to get as fluent as possible in the shortest amount of time possible, then maybe that is the best strategy to go for. But I think if you want to keep a balanced approach to it, which I think is the most effective way to do something like this, learning a difficult language like Vietnamese, the best way to go about it is to, remain curious, but also stay relaxed. Don't get too obsessed with the pursuit of learning it all as fast as you possibly can. One of the primary ways that I've learned Vietnamese is I've spoken with the locals as much as I can. So whether that be at a small restaurant, coffee shop, a ride in a taxi, or anywhere, a bar, out having drinks, whatever it is, if there's a local there and I'm in a situation where I can interact with them, I do my best to try to do that. Vietnamese locals are generally very patient with foreigners that are trying to speak Vietnamese because it's sort of a rarity here. So it's kind of a novelty for them. They have a little bit of fun seeing your efforts and a little bit of fun communicating in their language with you because it's just something that not a lot of foreigners do. They have the patience. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt in terms of like making mistakes. They're going to give you just a little bit of like more of a welcoming vibe than you would say get in like America, where if people don't know how to speak English, oftentimes Americans will become impatient pretty quickly and they'll basically be like, you learn English or don't talk to me. So it's definitely not that mentality here. It's more of a, oh, you don't speak Vietnamese? Totally understandable. Most foreigners don't. I appreciate your effort trying to speak Vietnamese, and I'm gonna help you out as much as I can. Also, try to remember that when speaking a foreign language that you're not fluent in, there's definitely going to be a level of fear. There's definitely gonna be a level of anxiety when you're trying to do that, especially with native speakers. And you might run into some people who are impatient or might try to ridicule your efforts. Don't pay attention to those people. Those people are obviously dealing with some personal problems of their own if they have to try to ridicule someone for making an effort at doing something that's very difficult that they probably can't do themselves. So don't be scared of that. Remember that when you're speaking to people who have a good head on their shoulders, people who are worthy of your regard, those people are going to be patient with you. And anyone else who's not, I wouldn't spend any time worrying about what they think, because I just don't think that's a very good person anyways. The next main strategy that I've used in order to learn Vietnamese is that I've remained patient with myself, and I've stayed willing to make mistakes. It's a very difficult language. It has 6 tones. 5 of those are used here in the southern region of Vietnam. But anyways, it's a tonal language, which means you're going to have pronunciation errors. It's just gonna be a thing. You're going to mishear words until you get used to hearing exactly how they sound. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to be patient enough to make those mistakes. And that sort of ties into that, don't get super obsessive about learning everything in one day. You'd be really surprised at how much, like overnight or over the course of a couple days, your brain can sort of mold its way into speaking a certain tone in a better way, or hearing a certain tone in a more understandable way. Sometimes when I'm trying really hard to learn something in Vietnamese, how to say it correctly, and I'm repeatedly making the same error over and over, I find that sometimes if I just give myself a break and go to bed and then wake up the next day and try it, I can do it a lot better. So it's actually a little bit shocking how much the brain is able to sort of, I don't know, do what it needs to do, but when you give it that rest, it sort of trains itself to accomplish that task that you were trying so hard to accomplish. There have definitely been times where I felt overwhelmed and just really confused by the language and felt feelings of, all right, I just want to give up. But that's when you really need to take a step back and give yourself a little bit of a break. Understand that it is very difficult and that you're not going to learn everything overnight. So give yourself a break, try again tomorrow, try it again in a couple days. There's really no shame in having a hard time learning this language, because it's just a difficult language for English speakers to learn. I have been here quite a while. I've been here for a little over 6 years in Vietnam. But one of the things that I've done for that entire time is I've had Vietnamese friends, or I've had Vietnamese girlfriends, and surrounded myself with Vietnamese native speakers and spent significant time with Vietnamese native speakers. And I think this is another key element to learning Vietnamese, because then you're constantly surrounded by the language. You're hearing it every day. You're hearing it spoken in the correct way every single day. It's definitely possible to come live here and to not have any Vietnamese friends, to not consider dating anyone who's Vietnamese, and to really not have anyone who's Vietnamese in your life regularly. It's definitely possible. There's plenty of people who do that. They live here and they only hang out with other expats, other people who speak English, and they just don't expose themselves to native speakers. If learning Vietnamese is a goal of yours, and I think it should be for anyone who's living here or planning to live here, then you should make an effort to bring Vietnamese native speakers into your life via friendship, via romance, via work, whatever it is. But do your best to surround yourself with native speakers, because that's going to help you learn the language a little bit quicker. Not only are you going to be exposed to the language, hearing it how it's supposed to be spoken, but you're also going to have someone there who you can ask for tips. You can say, hey, what does this mean? Or how can I say this the right way? And they're going to be very willing to help you, because that's your friend, or that's your girlfriend or boyfriend, that's your husband or wife, right? They're going to be someone who's there to support you, and they're going to be excited about your interest in learning their language. And the last thing I want to mention in terms of learning Vietnamese, not because it's not important or because it's the least helpful thing, but because I've leaned on it the least in terms of all of the other things I've mentioned, is getting yourself a Vietnamese teacher. I've had a Vietnamese teacher for about 1 month for the entire time I've been here. That was this August. I did start taking learning Vietnamese a little bit more seriously, got a Vietnamese teacher, and it definitely did help me improve. Getting a teacher can put you on sort of a regular track, a regular schedule in terms of learning Vietnamese, and you're obviously going to be speaking with someone who is a native speaker, who can correct your pronunciation, and who you're paying to help you learn the language better. So that's definitely helpful. It's just something that I haven't done for a long time, So that's why I listed it last. I took a break from it last month. The month of September, I didn't take any lessons, and I still haven't gotten back on it. I do plan to get back to studying with a teacher. I have a good teacher. I really enjoy taking lessons with her. I do it all online, and it's for a very reasonable rate. So if you're interested in learning Vietnamese, you can definitely get started online with a teacher wherever you are in the world. Or if you come here, you can get a teacher online or a teacher that you can meet in person. Getting a teacher is very reasonable in terms of the cost. It ranges anywhere from like $9 an hour to about $15 an hour. That's a general range. I think a very effective way is to book 2 or 3 lessons a week, about 1 or 2 hours each lesson. And then you've got a commitment. You've got a schedule that way of, all right, these are my scheduled hours to learn Vietnamese. But you'll definitely want to supplement that with practice outside of the classroom. You're not going to learn the language really well studying 3 hours or 6 hours a week with a teacher. You're going to make your biggest leaps in terms of comprehension and understanding outside of the classroom, practicing with locals, spending more and more hours interacting with other native speakers, and putting yourself in situations where speaking Vietnamese is really important or necessary. So why should you learn Vietnamese? Well, if you're planning to live here, or if you're already living in Vietnam, if you learn Vietnamese, you're going to be able to speak with a large portion of the population here that doesn't speak English. So you're going to be able to make more friends that way. You're gonna be able to network, make more connections that way. You're gonna open yourself up to the vast majority of people here who do not speak English. You're going to have an easier life here. You're gonna be able to be more self-reliant. If you wanna come out and get yourself something to drink or something to eat, you're gonna be able to order that all on your own. You're gonna be able to pay for that on your own. You're not gonna need someone else's help to go out and do simple things that are crucial for your life and your quality of life here. I think overall you're going to save yourself a little bit of money too. When you speak Vietnamese, you'll be able to find the prices of things at different places. You'll be able to bargain with people, let's say like a market situation. And you might avoid something that does happen here, unfortunately, is that sometimes foreigners do get overcharged for things. Only slightly. It's really not that big of a problem, but it does happen occasionally. And usually you'll be able to avoid that problem if you do speak Vietnamese, because number one, the people here are going to have a little bit more respect for you and treat you a little bit more like they would another local. And number two, you're probably going to overhear the price that someone else is getting, or you're going to be able to ask the price in advance before you pay for something. So I do think overall you're going to put yourself in a situation where you'll probably save yourself some money as well. Another key benefit is that you're going to understand the culture more. You're going to be in situations where you're hearing Vietnamese conversation, you're hearing different sayings in Vietnamese that are, you know, like idioms. You're going to understand just how people live a little bit more here, and you're going to have a more culturally rich experience that way. And just in a general sense, you're going to feel more connected to society and your community when you do speak some Vietnamese. You're going to be interacting with the locals. You're going to be plugged more into society and your neighbors and your neighborhood, and you're going to feel more a part of where you're living. And I think it's just an overall richer experience, a better experience. Just when you put that effort in, you're going to feel good about it. You're going to feel like, wow, I've accomplished something, and I do feel more connected to the people and the place that I live. And I really do encourage anyone who's living here or planning to live here to prioritize learning Vietnamese, because it's not something that I've always done since I've lived here, and it's definitely not something that most foreigners do when they're living here. But I think there's a lot of good reasons to do it, and I think that overall it's only going to make your life easier when you're living here in Vietnam. So those are the simple things that I've done to learn Vietnamese, and things that you can definitely do to also learn Vietnamese when you're considering being an expat and living here in Vietnam. Anyways, I hope you guys found that information useful and that you liked the video. If you did like the video, click the like button, subscribe to the channel to support the growth, and leave any comments you have. I'm really happy to hear from y'all. And I'll see y'all in the next vlog. Peace.